It was a Tuesday night. I remember because the bar was half empty, and the weather outside had turned to that bitter kind of cold that seeps through your jacket no matter how thick. I'd just finished a job site inspection in Charlotte. I was 2 bourbons deep, waiting on a medium-rare ribeye I wasn't all that hungry for. That's when my phone buzzed. 1 image. No message. I tapped it open. Her smile hit me first. That smile I used to think meant everything. And then, his hand, wrapped around her waist like it had always belonged there. Derek. My best friend since we were 12. They were on a yacht. My yacht, bought last summer when business hit a new high. I'd taken her out on it twice. She said she got seasick. I stared at the screen. I didn't blink. "Sir, your steak?" the waiter asked. I nodded, barely looking up. "Yeah, thanks." Didn't touch the food. I just sat there, reading the image like it was a blueprint. The details came slow. Then all at once, her hand on his chest, his watch, the one I bought him for standing as my best man, the champagne bottle, the cabin in the background. She knew what she was doing. This wasn't an accident. This was a message. When I finally got her on the phone, she didn't answer with guilt. "Hey," she said, casual as ever. "You still in Charlotte?" "Got your photo," I replied. There was a long pause. Then, with a sigh, she said, "I didn't want you to find out that way." I leaned back in the booth. So how was I supposed to find out? "I was going to tell you, eventually." Before or after the bank account emptied, her voice shifted. Defensive. "Look, it wasn't just about the money, all right? You're never home. You're married to your business." I let that hang in the air for a second, and Derek, that just happened? It wasn't planned, if that's what you're asking. But you're on my yacht, drinking my champagne, wearing the dress I bought you for our anniversary. I'm sorry, okay? You're not. I cut in. Calm, flat. "You're not sorry. You're just exposed." She didn't say anything, so I said, "Tell Derek I said hi." And I hung up. I stared out the window of the restaurant for a long time after that. The steak was cold, congealed. I asked for the check without eating a bite. On the drive back to the hotel, I didn't play music, didn't think about revenge, not yet. I thought about the little things, how she used to hum when folding laundry, how Derek always sat at the same chair at our table, the one closest to the fridge, how she started managing the bills 3 months ago, how he dropped by unannounced, just to say hey. I wasn't blind, just trusting, stupidly trusting, and now I was awake. When I got to the hotel, I poured myself another bourbon. No ice. I stood by the window and stared at the city lights. Below, people moved in and out of crosswalks. Headlights blinked like Morse code in the fog. And I realized something. They thought I'd break. But I don't break, I build. She took love, he took trust. But they left me something even more valuable. Clarity. That night, I didn't rage, I didn't cry. I made a list. Some people say you can feel a shift before your life breaks, they're right. But most of us are too damn busy to notice. I was 27 when I met Lauren. She walked into a contractor's networking mixer wearing a red blazer and confidence that filled the room. I'd just landed my first mid-size remodeling job. My company was barely a company, just me, a rusted pickup, and a folding table in the garage. She saw something in me, or maybe she just saw potential. We were married inside of a year. No one warned me about speed. How the faster something catches fire, the faster it burns out. "You're working late again?" she asked one night, leaning in the doorway of the garage while I sorted invoices. "We're finally landing commercial bids," I said. "If I can get this paperwork done, we can lock in the school gym project." She gave a soft laugh, stepping inside. "You know spreadsheets don't love you back, right?" "They do when they pay the mortgage," I said, smiling. She walked up behind me, hands on my shoulders. "I miss you," she whispered. I paused, felt the pull. But the bids were due at midnight. Derek had been around long before Lauren. We met on the first day of 7th grade after he punched a kid for calling me a slur. After that, we were glued at the hip. When I started the business, he offered to pitch investors while I handled operations. He had the charm, I had the grit. At first it worked. We were a good team until the contracts grew, and so did his ego. "You're still using physical ledgers?" He laughed one afternoon. I glanced up from the books. "It keeps me organized." "Come on, man, we're building something big. You gotta think scale, automation, delegation." I shrugged. "I'll scale once the foundation's solid." He rolled his eyes, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and flopped onto the couch. That was Derek in a nutshell, more polish than patience. The signs were small. Lauren stopped asking about my day. Derek started spending more time in the office. Alone. One night I walked into the kitchen and found them both at the counter. She was showing him something on her laptop. They jumped apart like kids caught stealing cookies. "What's up?" I asked. Lauren smiled too quickly. "Just going over some budgeting apps. Derek says you could streamline expenses." Derek nodded. "Just trying to help." I let it slide, but that's when I started making copies. Quiet ones, financial records, property deeds, company shares, just in case. Lauren changed once the money came in. New hair, new friends, new taste in wine. "You built something incredible," she told me one night at a charity gala, swirling her glass. "You, not we." She didn't say it with malice, just detachment. We stood in a room full of people I barely knew, dressed in tuxedos I didn't pick, applauding causes I didn't understand. She fit. I didn't. Derek pulled me aside later that night. "We could double revenue if you stepped back from the field work," he said. "Who's gonna check? The crews?" He smirked. "Hire someone." I shook my head. "I'd rather know the beams are level than assume they are." He clapped my back. "You're too old school." But I knew buildings. And I knew people. I just didn't want to believe what I was seeing. Looking back, the pattern was clear. Lauren started asking for access to our company accounts to simplify taxes. Derek began offering to restructure our client funnels. One night, I caught them whispering in the backyard. When I opened the sliding door, they jolted apart like teenagers. "We were talking about surprise ideas for your birthday," she said, grinning too wide. Derek raised his beer. "You didn't hear that." I nodded, pretending to believe it, but inside something went cold. In the weeks that followed, I started watching, listening. Lauren began working out more. Late-night classes, new perfume, password changes. Derek stopped looping me into partnership emails. I found invoices I hadn't approved, clients I hadn't met, and then there was the beach house. "Why don't we sell it?" Lauren asked casually. One morning over coffee. "It's been in my family since I was a kid." She shrugged. "It's old, needs work, you barely go." I go to remember who I am. She didn't respond, but that was the moment I knew they weren't trying to leave me. They were replacing me. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was how polite it all was. No blow-ups, no screaming, just a slow, calculated shuffle to the side. I wasn't a husband anymore, not a friend, not a partner, just an obstacle. I poured a whiskey that night and sat in the garage, same folding table, same worn floor. I opened the ledgers I never stopped using. I looked at every date, every transaction, and I started building again. Not with hammers this time, with patience, and with the one thing they forgot I had, blueprints. It was early evening when I got back. The sun was low, casting long shadows across the driveway. Everything looked the same. House still standing, porch light still flickering like it always did when the bulb needed changing. But the key turned with hesitation. Inside, it was quiet, too quiet. I dropped my duffel at the door. There was no smell of dinner, no hum of the TV. Just absence. The living room had been cleared out. Art from our honeymoon in Tuscany, gone. The whiskey decanter I'd gotten for my 40th, empty shelf. I walked through the house like a ghost, taking note of what no longer belonged to me. Bedroom closet, half empty. Her side, jewelry box missing. Bathroom, just my toothbrush. But it wasn't until I reached the home office that the real damage hit. A manila envelope was waiting on the desk, sealed neatly. My name written in her handwriting. Inside, a copy of a legal filing, a property transfer, authorization signatures, bank withdrawal logs, the cabin. Gone. An hour later, I was at my banker's office. "Mark," I said quietly, "I need you to walk me through this." He adjusted his glasses and frowned. "Withdrawals started 3 weeks ago, all under your joint signature authority. She moved the money into a private account, then wired half of it to an investment firm in Miami. She forged that signature. I can't prove that, but yeah, I'd bet on it." I nodded. "And the cabin? Sold. Quick transfer. Buyer's name matches a trust account. Derek's." I sat back in the leather chair. The room was warm, but my spine felt cold. Mark cleared his throat. "I'm sorry, man." I looked him in the eye. "No, don't be. This isn't the end. It's just the reveal." I didn't call her, didn't text him. Instead, I sat in my truck for a while in the parking lot. Engine off. I remembered laying the floorboards in that cabin with my grandfather. He made me do it twice because the first time, the slats weren't level. Said, "If you build it right, you only build it once." She thought she sold it. But what she didn't know was that the cabin sat in a trust, one with reversibility clauses. She didn't read the fine print. She thought she could take history and turn it into a profit. And Derek, he forgot about the quiet little deal I made 6 months ago. After his third botched contract and a blown client account, I had our lawyer reassign his shares under an emergency clause. It triggered after his mismanagement report hit HR. On paper, Derek hadn't been part of my company in half a year. He just didn't know it yet. That night, I opened a locked box in my bedroom closet. Inside were old files, paperwork I'd never fully trusted to the cloud, signed authorizations, business logs, password lists, every signature, every receipt, every clause. I scanned the cabin transfer deed. She had forged my initials, poorly, the loops were off. My lawyer would spot it in 5 seconds. I stared at the fireplace, thought about the last time we were all up there, me, Lauren, Derek, sitting on the porch like everything was fine. She laughed that night, said she felt free by the lake. She wasn't lying, she'd already decided. By morning, I'd made 3 calls. First, my lawyer, Ellis. Old school, mean as hell but clean. Second, Mitchell, a forensic accountant I'd hired once for a subcontractor audit. Third, Rico, ex-military buddy, now runs cyber trace and penetration testing. I told them everything. I didn't ask them to burn it down, just to document everything. 2 days later, Ellis called. "She's done, forgery, wire fraud, possibly conspiracy. If we push this, she'll be lucky to walk with her purse." I let that sink in. And the cabin? Reversal in process. Technically, trust never permitted resale. She triggered an automatic return clause. It's yours again. And Derek? Doesn't legally own what he thinks he does. Also, he paused. "You'll want to see this." He emailed me a screenshot. Lauren and Derek had opened a joint venture. Small business license registered last month. They named it Legacy Horizons. I laughed. Out loud. In my kitchen. Alone. That word. Legacy. They thought they could steal mine and rename it theirs. I didn't scream. Didn't rage. I created a folder on my desktop, Operation Clean Cut. Inside it, I saved copies of every record, emails, invoices, signature logs, surveillance from the cabin's smart lock. I wasn't going to take them to war. I was going to show the truth, and then let the truth do the rest. By the end of the week, I'd rewritten my will, updated every document, shifted my business assets into an untouchable holding company. Lauren didn't even notice I was home. She didn't call, didn't ask. But that's all right, because from now on, she doesn't get to be part of the story. The first frost came early that year. I remember the crunch of it under my boots as I stepped onto the porch of the cabin. Mine. Again, legally, officially, silently returned. There was no victory parade. Just me, a hot mug of black coffee, and a plan that had taken shape in silence. I didn't want revenge. I wanted the record corrected. So I got to work. 3 days after getting the cabin back, I sat at my dining table with Ellis, my lawyer. He flipped through folders as I spoke. I've traced 37 transactions, 13 of them unauthorized, 5 directly violate our bylaws, 3 break federal law. Ellis raised an eyebrow. And you're sure she forged your signature on the cabin deed? I scanned it through a signature validator. There's a 6-point deviation. Not to mention, she misspelled my middle name on the notary file. He chuckled under his breath. Sloppy. No, I said. Entitled. He leaned back. So, what's your move? I stared out the window at the frost-covered grass. Total exposure, quietly, all at once. I spent the next week building a timeline. Transaction by transaction. Phone logs, GPS data, email records. Every time she said she was at a retreat, she was at Derek's. Every time Derek said he was at a supplier meeting, he was transferring funds under false codes. I pulled footage from the smart security cams at the cabin. One clip showed Derek unlocking the front door using a passcode I never gave him. They weren't just dishonest. They were careless. Rico, my cyber guy, called me late one night. You want it encrypted or traceable? Traceable, I said. Every breadcrumb needs to lead home. He laughed. You're ruthless when you're quiet, man. I didn't laugh with him. Just efficient. I had him comb through Lauren's online purchases. The spa days charged to the business card. The flight. To Turks and Caicos filed as vendor relations. A jewelry purchase tagged under consultant bonus. I built a file. PDF format. Clear, time-stamped, organized. Then I created an anonymous submission and sent it to 3 places: the IRS, the State Business Fraud Unit, and the ethics board of our primary investor. No emotion, no message, just facts. Then came the corporate strikes. I triggered Clause 9C of our business insurance policy, the right to audit upon evidence of internal fraud. The auditors came in like termites, quiet, thorough, relentless. Within a week, they found 2 errors in Derek's project. Bids. The next week, they discovered 3 conflicts of interest. Lauren had authorized payments to vendors she'd never met, with no service rendered. I stayed invisible, never showed up, never spoke a word, but I heard the ripple. Ellis updated me over coffee. Client list is thinning. Word's out, something's off at your old office. Good, I said. I assume you leaked the internal report to the press? No, I replied. I leaked it to one client, the one who talks the most. Ellis smirked. Even better. Month 2. Invitations to galas stopped showing up at our old address. Derek's face disappeared from the company website. Lauren's personal brand account started posting less, then went dark. I hadn't spoken to either of them since the day I found that photo, but their world was shifting. They just didn't know why. Mitchell, my forensic accountant, called next. I can confirm at least 5 taxable discrepancies. You'll have the report by Monday. Also, you were right about the yacht. What about it? She listed it under a Shell LLC but paid for it using embezzled funds from the company's secondary line of credit. I wrote it down. Quietly, one more piece on the board. The final play wasn't loud. It was surgical. A former client, one who had been burned by Derek's misquotes, received an anonymous email with a spreadsheet. No commentary, just the numbers. 3 days later, he filed a lawsuit. Not mine. His. I sat back one evening, whiskey in hand, watching the fire crackle in the cabin hearth. They still hadn't called, still hadn't figured out the source, but they were unraveling, not because I attacked them, but because I let the truth speak louder than revenge. Revenge feels good for a minute, but clarity is forever. I didn't need to ruin them. I just needed to remind them I never stopped building. And now, I was building something they couldn't touch. The country club was dressed to impress that night. String lights glowing like fireflies over the courtyard, jazz humming from the patio speakers, and the smell of overpriced appetizers drifting in the air. It was a celebration a 25th anniversary for old friends of ours. The kind of night meant for toasts, laughter, and pretending everything was fine. But not for me. For me, it was the final move in a game I never wanted to play. They arrived 20 minutes late. Of course they did. Lauren in a black satin dress that shimmered under the lights. Her hair swept into a style I didn't recognize anymore. Derek trailing beside her in a custom-tailored suit, wearing the kind of smug grin you earn from thinking you've won. They worked the room like nothing had changed. Air kisses, handshakes, that laugh Lauren used when she was trying too hard. But I noticed the glances, the guests whispering behind glasses of champagne, the host hesitating when greeting Derek, the way eyes darted toward me when I stood up. The keep buzz had started long before the main course. "Didn't think you'd come," Derek said, patting my shoulder as he reached for a whiskey at the bar. "I RSVP'd," I replied. "Didn't see a reason not to show." Lauren smiled tightly. "Hope there's no hard feelings." I held her gaze. "I don't do feelings. Anymore." She blinked. Derek chuckled. "Still the same old stoic." I raised my glass. "Only thing that hasn't changed." Dinner was served. Small talk filled the gaps between bites of filet mignon and stories recycled for the 100th time. I listened. I smiled. I waited. When dessert hit the table, I stood. "Before we raise our glasses, I'd like to say something." Chairs shifted. Silverware paused. Derek leaned back in his seat, confident. Lauren rested her hand on his arm like they were the picture of elegance. I looked around the room. Old clients, colleagues, friends, investors, the people they still thought they could impress. "I've known Mike and Sandra for 20 years, I began. "And if there's one thing I've learned watching them, it's that legacy isn't built on appearances. It's built on character, quiet choices, private sacrifices." Heads nodded. Someone murmured, "That's right." So tonight, I just want to raise a glass to integrity, in business, in marriage, in life. I lifted my glass. To those who don't just talk about values, but live by them. Then I reached under my chair and pulled out a stack of white envelopes, each one sealed, each one addressed. One by one, I handed them out. "What's this?" a man in a navy blazer asked, turning the envelope over. "Documentation," I said, simply. "Evidence, truth." Murmurs spread like fire across the table. Lauren's smile cracked for the first time. Derek opened his and stiffened. Inside, a copy of the civil suit summary of the fraud investigation, the trust attorney's statement, on the illegally sold cabin screenshots of embezzled transactions, a transcript from a recorded call Lauren had with a bank rep. Lauren's voice rose, brittle and shrill. "What are you doing?" I turned to her, calm, correcting the record. "You ambushed us." "No," I said. "I waited. Gave you every chance to walk away clean. You chose otherwise." Derek stood up, jaw clenched. "You think this proves something?" "It proves everything," I said. "And it's already in the system. This," I gestured to the table. "This is just the courtesy copy." His face drained. He looked to the host, who quickly looked away. Lauren stood, shaking slightly. "You don't get to ruin us like this." I met her eyes one last time. "I didn't ruin you. You did that just fine on your own." They left early. No goodbyes. People watched them go, then looked at me. Not with pity, but with something else. Respect, maybe. I didn't sit back down. I stepped outside. The night air was cold, but I felt lighter than I had in months. By morning, Derek's photo had been scrubbed from the company's website. A press release announced a transition in leadership. Lauren's influencer page had been flooded, not with praise, but with questions, screenshots, comments she couldn't control. The truth had moved faster than either of them imagined, and I hadn't raised my voice once. I walked the wooded trail behind the cabin that night. Leaves crunching underfoot, no celebration, no victory dance, just peace. Not the kind that's given, the kind you earn, one calculated step at a time. The morning fog still hugged the treetops when I stepped out onto the porch. The boards creaked. Underfoot, the warped, weathered, familiar. This place had always been a sanctuary. Even when I'd forgotten it, even when she tried to erase it. But the land remembered, and now so did I. The cabin's title had reverted weeks ago. That trust clause my grandfather insisted on all those years back, the one she never bothered to read, activated the moment she forged the deed. So here I was, back in the house built by calloused hands and quiet wisdom. The first few days, I didn't touch a thing. I just sat on the porch, watching the sun spill across the tree line, coffee in hand. No calls, no calendar reminders, just breath, just space. By the second week I started repairs, sanded the porch, fixed the roof line, repainted the door, one board at a time, one nail at a time. A neighbor stopped by mid-project. "Thought you sold this place," he said, leaning on his truck. "Thought I did too," I replied, smiling. "Turns out some things know where they belong." He nodded. "Good to see you back." That was it, no digging, no gossip. Just a man who understood peace when he saw it. These days I work remote. Smaller contracts, selective projects. I spend more time with people who don't ask about money. There's a rhythm here, birds at dawn, hammer in the afternoon, whiskey by the fire at night, and it's enough. Sometimes folks ask why I didn't press further. Why I didn't bury them in court, crush them completely. The answer's simple. I didn't need to. Lauren moved in with her sister. Derek took a plea, fraud, falsified contracts, breach of fiduciary duty. His name's a whisper now in every client circle he once bragged about. They became their own undoing. And I became something else. A few nights back, I found the old wedding ring in a drawer I'd nearly forgotten. It was tucked in a small velvet box, right where she'd left it the night she walked out. Still polished, still whole. I didn't toss. He didn't smash it, didn't bury it. I placed it in the drawer beside the fireplace, closed it gently. Not out of sentiment, out of memory. A quiet reminder. I wasn't the fool. I was the builder. And I still am.